The way the football boot industry works these days is that there's always something new. A new product comes out and people are already anticipating what's next, which is how we end up with a lot of change for the sake of change. Not necessarily better products, just different ones, and in some cases, boots that are actually worse. Not all brands are like this though, Mizuno being one of them, where in this box, I have a pair of football boots that are legitimately 10 years in the making. That football boot being this guy right here, the Mizuno Morelia Neo 3 Beta, made in Japan, of course, which is 10 years of evolution in Mizuno's speed boot category, where they have refined the boot to a point where I think it's hard to argue that this isn't the best speed boot the Mizuno brand has ever made. Now, regular viewers of this channel know that I'm a huge fan of the Mizuno brand, but haven't really been that into the Morelia Neo line, either the original or the Neo 2. It's not that they're bad boots, because it's the exact opposite. They're just not my cup of tea. However, last year when we got the limited edition Morelia Neo 2 Beta variant, I was extremely impressed with the changes Mizuno made. And for the Morelia Neo 3 Beta, notice the beta part in the name, a lot of that tech and a lot of those ideas made their way into what is no longer a limited edition release, just the brand new model. They've also made some other very interesting changes and maintained the core DNA of the Morelia Neo line, but also made, I think, some significant improvements despite the boot actually looking pretty similar to the models that came before it. So if you're a fan of the Mizuno brand or just a fan of very well thought out football boot products, I think there's a lot to like about these, and we're gonna go over everything there is to know in today's review. So if you want to learn more, including how they fit and feel on feet, please stick around and watch the entire review. And if you are interested in a pair of these for yourself, I'll leave a little pop-up on screen, or you can click the first link down below. That's going to take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes to pick these up below their normal retail price. By the way, if you guys do end up enjoying this video, please don't forget to support it with a like. It helps me out a lot. And if you are new here watching for the first time and don't want to miss out on weekly videos on everything football boots, make sure you hit that subscribe button. As far as extras go, the boots come in a matte black box with the metallic gold Mizuno Made in Japan branding there on the lid. And then here's a quick look at the label, because I know there are a bunch of you that like to see that. And then inside the box, they don't come with any other extras aside from some like leather care instructions and tags and stuff like that. But you do get a boot bag with some strings to seal up the top. You can't wear it as a backpack because it's just not that kind of string bag, but it's a black color with, again, the gold Made in Japan Mizuno logo there on the front, nothing on the back. It's an okay string bag. It gets a 7 out of 14.4. Now, as for the boots themselves, I can tell you right off the bat that Mizuno has done an excellent job here. And what I like about the Mizuno brand, aside from their quality first approach, which is very different from other brands, which I think have more of a tech focused approach, and then quality comes secondary. Mizuno is kind of the opposite of that. But with the Morelia Neo 3 Beta, what's cool about this is it maintains all the core concepts that the Morelia Neo line has stood for from when it first came out 10 years ago. It's a lightweight speed boot with high quality kangaroo leather that is just extremely well made and legitimately durable, along with other little features that are unique to this specific product. Most of those features are still present 10 years later on the Morelia Neo 3 Beta. So the core concept still remains the same, but they've added some new tech and they've just refined the boot in certain ways to where I legitimately think that if you compare this to the boot from 10 years ago, it's still gonna have some similarities, which is what you want, but it feels legitimately improved, which is very cool and not something that we often see in the modern football boot industry. Now, if you're familiar with the Morelia Neo line, these should look extremely familiar because they haven't really changed the overall look all that much. It's still kangaroo leather in the toe box and forefoot area. It's still a central lacing system. It's still a synthetic material through the midfoot. It still has the little tail on the back. It still has the external heel counter, and it has more or less the same stud pattern, although there have been some minor tweaks that I'll talk about in just a second. So again, core concept, pretty much the same, which might seem like a lazy way of doing things, but they have effectively changed every single thing about this boot when compared to all past Morelia Neo models. So starting with the kangaroo leather that you have here in the forefoot, I'll say point blank that this is the best quality leather we have ever seen on a Morelia Neo product. It feels incredible, and honestly, I hope it comes through in the video. It just looks like it's extremely well made. Super soft, Really, really plush, feels incredible on feet, nice and flexible as well, adds an element of comfort that you're not going to get from pretty much any other speed boot, and honestly, it just feels fantastic. It is 6 millimeters thick, which is actually 2 millimeters more than the 4 millimeter thickness of the leather on the Morelia Neo 2 Beta, which I guess is the model that technically this replaces. I think long term, the 6 millimeter thick leather just feels more premium and is going to be more durable as well. They've also reverted back to double stitching rather than single stitching, which was kind of a classic element of the Morelia Neo 2, and I think this is better in the long run as well. It doesn't take away from the softness, but it does add a little bit more structure for the sake of responsiveness. Also, something they've done here is that they've actually increased the volume of the toe box area. So if you look from the side, it's not quite as flat or as low as what we used to see. And this is something that Mizuno has said actually improves the barefoot touch on the ball, which might not seem like that makes any sense. Why would you add more volume rather than make the boot fit tighter? But I think the logic here is not only that this is going to be more comfortable for most people, certainly that's the case for myself. That was one of my major issues with previous generations of the Morelia Neo. I just thought that there wasn't enough volume in the toe box area. I felt like it was squeezing my feet rather than fitting them comfortably. But also, when you consider that once you put your foot inside of any football boot, what is naturally going to happen is the leather is going to expand in width. So if you add a little bit of material on top, it's going to be stretched thin and kind of pressed against the top of your foot. So honestly, what they've done here just makes sense because you not only allow for a really tight fit still, but you also allow for better comfort. And also, we've been brainwashed by all these big brands that leather is the opposite of a barefoot feel. When you have thin leather like this, that's this soft, really the touch on the ball is fantastic. And if you're looking for that very close feel, you're definitely getting it here, despite this not being knit or a more traditional synthetic, which we're used to seeing on speed boots. Moving through the midfoot, where you can see the cutoff point here, running through the forefoot. So they haven't actually increased the amount of leather in comparison to previous Morelia Neo models, which is a good or bad thing, depending on what your opinion is. Again, they wanted to maintain the core DNA, but you can see carrying over from the Neo 2 Beta is that same kind of textile-based synthetic material with a fused layer on top that's extremely thin, very, very flexible, and honestly was one of my favorite aspects of the Neo 2 Beta that we get here on the Neo 3 Beta, just because it still has really good structure to it, meaning that once the laces are tied, the lockdown and responsiveness is quite good, but it still has a little bit of, I guess, forgiveness to it in terms of how it wraps your foot. It doesn't feel like it's suffocating your feet through the midfoot, which was kind of my main issue with the regular Morelia Neo 2. That's what I like so much about the Beta, and I'm really happy that that element, this material, has carried over into the Neo 3 Beta. It just makes a lot of sense and actually really matches the flexibility of the leather in the forefoot. So one thing that I've always complained about with this line is kind of the harsh transition between the stiffer synthetic to the really soft leather in the forefoot. While these are very different materials in terms of overall feel, and it's definitely noticeable that there's less padding when kind of controlling and passing the ball with the midfoot area of your foot, I really do appreciate how natural the boot as a whole feels because of the choice of materials Mizuno has made. Which brings us to what is the most visually distinctive change of the Neo 3 Beta, and that is the one-piece upper construction, where you can see the central part of the upper is filled in with an elasticated knit material. So officially we have somewhat of a sock boot from the Mizuno brand, and I know that there's going to be some hardcore Mizuno fans that are going to be very upset about this change, but honestly, this was the one change that I was personally asking for from the Mizuno brand on this particular line. I just think that it makes sense in terms of cutting down on bulk. I actually think that the double lace hole setup that is required when you have a one-piece upper actually allows for better tension to be held within the entire lacing system once it's tied tight, which does ultimately improve fit and overall responsiveness, so you get that as well. It also just eliminates layers of material, and you're not going to have the tongue sliding from side to side. It's just thinner, it's more natural, it stretches across the top of your foot pretty much perfectly like a pair of socks would. And honestly, given what they've done with everything else on this boot, that was the logical change that needed to be made, and ultimately they've done a really good job. Is it as high quality as some of the Flyknit material that we've seen on some Nike boots? Probably not, but it's not low quality by any means, and it's not something that I think impacts the feel of the boot in any negative way. And then also something interesting that they've done, you can see here at the very top, they've actually given you 3 lace hole options. So you could technically use all 3, or you could just choose to skip one, lace them a little bit lower, lace them a little bit higher. It's just giving you some options in terms of how much kind of lock you want in the heel area if heel slippage is potentially an issue based on the specific shape of your feet. I don't feel the need to use this bottom lacing position, but I do like the fact that they give you that option should you want to use it. Moving to the rear, you will find a low cut design where you can see there's a bit of an extension here at the front, which is kind of necessary just to grab onto when putting the boots on, but they've also carried over that signature element of the Morelia Neo silhouette in this little tail here at the back, which I was never really a big fan of in terms of feel, more so just in terms of look, especially when it was kind of a stiffer material. Now it's just an elasticated knit, so there's no restriction here. It's pretty much just a design element. So I guess there's an argument to be made that it doesn't need to be there at all. But I think from the side profile, especially in this accent red color with a white upper, it just looks really, really cool. And you can see along the edges, they've actually extended the lip of the low cut design in this elasticated knit kind of sock-like material, which does create kind of like an edgeless kind of taper around the actual ankle itself, which could arguably be a little bit more comfortable. That is the approach Mizuno is going for. I don't find it to be particularly noticeable, but it is a change nonetheless. Moving to the heel liner, you will find the usual suede material, which is really, really nice. They have seemingly added more padding along the back as well as the sides of the ankle. So lockdown and general comfort, I found to be quite good as well. They have kind of reworked the shape of the boot in this area of the foot. It's maybe a little bit more narrow, but they've added more padding. So it just feels more comfortable. My heel feels extremely locked in place, which is all you can really ask for. Then the insole, which is fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It is a very standard kind of mesh liner on the surface. They're no longer using that kind of sandpaper texturing because they had complaints from a lot of their customers saying that it would actually grab their socks and make the boots more difficult to put on than they wanted. So they've just gone for something more traditional, which I guess is the right call if that's what their consumers wanted. I kind of like the texturing on the surface. There's some perforations through the midfoot, and it's just made from a single layer of this white foam. About as standard an insole as you're going to find. Moving to the base, while it might appear to be very similar to previous Morelia Neo models, it is in fact completely new. You still have an external heel counter that I believe is slightly smaller this time around and I think looks very cool. This little design right here reminds me a lot of the T90 Laser 3, which is kind of a weird comparison, but that's immediately what I thought of, and you have that on both the lateral and medial side. Nice structure to it as well, so it is very solid. And then the sole plate, as you can see, visually very similar. There's this new kind of design element where you have almost like this chevron look in a forward direction that gives it, I think, a really cool look, but there is actually an internal shank right here and then these little cutouts to shave some weight as well as allowing you to see that shank. And what that's there to do is basically increase stiffness basically from the heel going right into the forefoot to give you this nice kind of spring back effect, or at least plenty of structure through that area of the foot that you don't really want bending all that much. And then the forefoot, while again it looks very similar to what they've been doing before, it does seem to be ever so slightly more flexible this time around. So the boot actually feels more natural but also more responsive in regards to the sole plate. I prefer this over any of the previous Morelia Neo variations, although I do feel like this is one of those elements where if you like something a little bit stiffer, you might prefer what they had before, because it did feel stiffer than this to me. Again, everyone's going to have a slightly different experience there. As far as the stud pattern is concerned, the layout is identical as you can see, but they have actually changed the angle of the studs ever so slightly. When you hold a Morelia Neo from this angle, especially a Neo 2, the studs are angled slightly outwards rather than kind of straight up and down. They've actually decreased that angle ever so slightly with the Neo 3 Beta, which is supposed to improve traction ever so slightly. Again, it's one of those changes that you're never really going to notice. You can see it's completely new tooling though, where it has this kind of target shape to the tip of the stud, which I think is a cool looking little detail. The one support stud in the middle. But again, I think one of the changes people wanted to see with the Morelia Neo was a bladed stud pattern, something more aggressive. And while they haven't given us quite that, I still think this stud pattern is a lot more aggressive than you might expect it to be. And as a whole, if you prefer something a little bit more traditional, this actually works extremely well. It's going to give you the feel that you're looking for. And trust me when I say there's more bite to this than you might realize. Which brings us to the weight, and despite how many changes Mizuno have made, the weight hasn't actually changed all that much. So I'm gonna weigh this pair for you today in real time. Keep in mind this pair is a size 9.5 US, although the boots run a little bit larger than they did before. So technically there's just more material here because it is a slightly bigger size. I'll explain in just a second, but you can see that they weigh in at 7.3 ounces, the equivalent of 207 grams, which is give or take about 5 grams heavier than the regular Morelia Neo 2. The Beta Neo 2 was actually lighter, but it's just a much thinner football boot in general. As a whole, they still feel very lightweight on feet. Are there lighter speed boots out there? Absolutely. But are there really any speed boots that offer the quality, fit, and comfort of the Neo 3 Beta? Absolutely not. So if you're looking for a light speed boot, these are going to feel light. So as you can see, I've swapped out the stock white laces, which admittedly are improved over the previous Morelia Neo as well. They're still kind of a weird material, but they're definitely less chunky. But I've swapped them out for some black reflective SR4U replacement laces, which accent very nicely with the black logo and black sole plate. Plus, they're not going to get dirty like the white laces will, especially these ones in this material. If you're interested in changing up the style of your boots in a very inexpensive way, SR4U laces are a great way to do that. There's a little pop-up in the corner of the screen, as well as a link down below in the description if you're interested in some for yourself. So be sure to go ahead and check that out. On feet, I'm really happy with how the Neo 3 Beta feels. It's kind of like a simplified feeling variation of the Neo 2 or Neo 2 Beta, which might not make a lot of sense given that there is a lot more going on technically with this boot. But because of the one-piece upper construction, the elasticated material across the top of the foot, you don't have any overlapping materials anymore. The boot as a whole just feels more streamlined across the entire foot and honestly just feels really good. The kangaroo leather in the forefoot, extremely flexible. The textile synthetic through the midfoot, just like the Beta 2, feels very structured. It holds your foot in place, but at the same time, it doesn't feel overly stiff. The lockdown in the heel area with a little bit of extra padding feels fantastic. And the sole plate, it's flexible in the right spots, it's stiff in the right spots. The boot as a whole just feels very well put together. As far as shape is concerned, like I mentioned, it did increase the volume of the toe box area, which I think is just a little bit more forgiving in terms of overall width and certainly feels more comfortable to me. It doesn't feel like they're squeezing my toes, especially out of the box, because they are leather. It is going to stretch a little bit as you wear them in, but these out of the box feel way more comfortable to me from just basically changing the shape ever so slightly. And as a whole, they don't feel as narrow as a lot of previous generation Morelia Neos did. So as long as you don't have exceptionally wide feet, these are boots that will legitimately fit pretty much everybody. And then there's the sizing, which is the one thing that is a little bit off. I'm wearing these in my usual 9.5 US, and there does seem to be some extra space at the tip of the toe where I definitely could go down half a size to a 9 if I wanted a really snug fit, which is preferably how I'd like to wear these. So in my opinion, if you want a tight fit, I would personally recommend going half a size down rather than sticking with your normal size. Although if you do like to have that little bit of extra space, going true to size won't necessarily make the boots unwearable, but they definitely do run a little bit bigger than previous generations did. So if you want the same type of fit, I'd recommend going half a size down. So to conclude this review, what I think a lot of people enjoy about the videos that I make is that I'm not afraid to share my brutally honest opinion. And in the case of a lot of top-end football boot products, there are often little things that once pointed out clearly don't make a lot of sense, whether it's a design issue, a quality issue, material used, whatever it might be. It's very rare to come across a product where it seems like everything was done perfectly, but every once in a while we come across something where it seems like everything was extremely well thought out and it's difficult for me to criticize. The Morelia Neo 3 Beta seems to be one of those boots for me where every single element, when I go down the checklist of what I think is good or bad about a football boot, more often than not, they've done a really good job. And if I had this like mental checklist of things that I would have changed about the Morelia Neo 2, even the Neo 2 Beta that I would have liked to seen in an improved variation, I feel like most of those changes have actually been made to the real product that you can now buy. So while I was never really a huge fan of this particular line, I really feel like they've made the changes to where this is now a football boot that I would be happy to wear, and I legitimately think it's one of the best speed boot options on the market right now. Granted, it's an expensive product, and that's the case with pretty much all made in Japan Mizuno products. Do you need them? Not necessarily. Do you want them? Absolutely. If you were looking for a cheaper alternative in this category with similar features, you can get a kangaroo leather upper and a fairly lightweight outsole with a conical stud pattern from the Puma King Platinum. They're great football boots, but are they anywhere near as refined and high quality and premium as the Neo 3 Beta made in Japan? Absolutely not. So if this is a type of football boot that appeals to you and you're willing to spend the money, this is simply the best option that you can buy in this category. Nothing even comes close. If I didn't cut my hand at the start of this video, I'd be clapping for these boots. Anyways, guys, that's it for my review. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. Again, if you're interested in a pair of these for yourself, first link down below, that's gonna take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes to pick these up below their normal retail price. If you have any questions, as always, leave them down below in the comments section, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you. If you aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.